Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first installment of Parenting Children with Exceptional Needs. I am one of your hosts, Kristy Michelsen, and I will be joined in a little bit by Ruth L. Snyder. Before I get started, I want to remind everyone that neither Ruth or I are medical specialists, and we are not here to give medical advice. We are just two women who happen to be authors with a few things in common, such as we both have children with exceptional needs. Both Ruth and I are hoping to build a community of other parents to discuss our journeys as well as our wins and our struggles as patients with, excuse me, not patients, parents with children with special needs. To get started, I just kind of want to give a little background about how I became a parent with children with exceptional needs. When I was younger, I had the same dreams as most little girls, and that dreams were to meet and fall in love with Prince Charming, get married, and live happily ever after. But never in my wildest dreams did I ever imagine that I would become a parent of someone with special needs. And in my case, it was children with autism. It all started when I was 18 and I was working in a little cigarette shop and I met my husband. We fell in love and got married. And a few months down the road, I found out I was pregnant. I was sick all the time. I had extremely high blood pressure and I couldn't stop throwing up. And so the doctors put me on what was called a high risk pregnancy. One night, about my 8th month in, I was actually feeling better. And I actually went out with my cousin who was visiting from Missouri, and she was trying to teach me how to drive a stick shift car because I'd never drove one before. And I stalled the car out, and all of a sudden, I started going into preterm labor. So she rushed me to the hospital, and they sent me home because the contraction monitor didn't show that I was having any contractions. I was just in pain. So they sent me home, and all night long, I was going through contractions, and then I started bleeding really bad. So I went back to the hospital, and once again, they hooked me up to the same monitor, and they said, "Ma'am, you're not having contractions. We honestly think you just have a really bad kidney infection. We're going to give you some medicine and let you lay here for a while and see if you feel better." Well, they kept pumping me full of Demerol, and it didn't work. I was miserable. And pretty soon, a night nurse came in and she physically checked me and she saw, "Ma'am, you're in labor." And I was like, they kept telling me I'm not in labor. And she goes, "I can't help it. You're in labor." And so what happened is they induced me, and I had my son at 9:48 p.m. He was premature. However, he was born not breathing. He was blue. He wouldn't cry. He was not breathing, nothing. And so they took him in immediately for emergency surgery. After that, he spent many weeks in the NICU, and I didn't get to take him home till he was at least a month and a half years old. But when he came home, he was hooked up to heart monitors because he had a little heart condition and a condition at the time called sleep apnea. So that was something very new for me to experience. Here I am, 18. I'm a new mother, and now I have these monitors in my house hooked up to my newborn son, and I didn't know what I was doing. So it was a new experience for me. But as my son got older, I began to notice other things that were different for me. And those things were that he would cry until he would turn blue and he would pass out. It would take me forever to get him back and breathing again. As he got a little older, he would rock, he would do a lot of rocking back and forth. And he would spin objects no matter what it was. He loved to spin objects. And he would bang his head on doors, and he was different from what I saw compared to the other kids around me. And I was like, I need to tell that to the doctor. So when I would tell the doctor, he would just tell me, "Oh, he's just young. He's not up to par with the other kids because he was born early. He's going to be a little bit developmentally delayed." And I still didn't know what that meant. I was 18 years old when I had my son. I was still learning and growing myself. So as he goes into school, he started becoming in his own little world. Most teachers would notice wouldn't play with other children. He was more into his own little world. And I chalked it up to him being behind the other kids because he was premature. A couple years later, I'm pregnant again. And I found out that I'm having a little girl. And once again, I had a high risk pregnancy due to a lot of issues with that pregnancy. I was bleeding, I was put on bed rest, there was a whole lot going on with her. But 9 months later, my little Cassie was born. She was actually born with the umbilical cord wrapped around her neck. And I didn't know anything was different about her at all until she hit 2 years old. She would not talk. She just had a fast gibberish talk. And the only word she could say was mumble because she loved the movie Happy Feet with the little penguin Mumble. She would walk on her tiptoes. She hated hugs. She hated hugs. And if she didn't follow a certain routine, she would throw things at my head. And I was like, what in the world is going on? I couldn't figure it out. Well, back in those days, it's been 21 years ago that she was at those stages, but back in those days, the law was you had to start school by the age of 6. And I was concerned about that because my daughter, she couldn't talk and she would throw things at people's head. But I put her in school because that was the law. I put her in school, and a few months after starting, I got approached by the teachers, and the teachers told me, there's something wrong with your daughter. She is strange. She is off the wall, and we don't understand her. And that made me angry. Who, as a teacher, could go and say something like that about a child? That made me so angry, and I was frustrated, and they were recommending me to put her through a bunch of tests through a psychologist. And at first, I was offended. I was very, very offended by that whole situation. But I went along with it, and I let my daughter get the testing. And during this testing, we found out that my daughter has moderate severe autism. She also has auditory processing disorder and mild mental retardation. My first thoughts and feelings about that were, oh my gosh, that's my little baby, and I just want to hold you in my arms and protect you from everything and everyone in this world, because who is going to understand? After that, we experienced so much more in our lives, and I started just getting very protective, and I felt a sense of anger a little bit, but not at my daughter. I was angry at myself. I was thinking to myself, what did I do during my pregnancy that could have caused this? What did I do to make my poor little baby have to go through this? And I went through a wave of different emotions, from anger to denial, from being sad, and also just wanting to protect my daughter. I also started to wonder, well, if she has autism, can my son have autism? And it was just never diagnosed. I went and I talked to teachers, and I asked them, I told them the situation, and I asked them, and a lot of them told me, oh, no, we don't think it's autism. We just think it's, he's developmentally delayed. It wasn't till years later that I found out that my son, too, had autism, and he also has sensory processing disorder. Now, with both kids at home, being on the spectrum, it is quite a challenge. Both of them have different needs. My son is actually high functioning. He is 24 years old. My daughter is moderate severe, which means she has a little more difficulty than my son, and she is 21. Every day, the feelings after a diagnosis change. There's going to be days where you feel, like I said, angry, and there's going to be days that you feel sad, and there's also going to be days that you feel alone and scared and like no one understands. And those are some of the things that I went through. And so when I was talking to our other host, Ruth, who is going to be joining me in just a few minutes here, Ruth is also an author like me, and she has children with special needs. And we were talking, and we were like, it'd be so wonderful to build a community of other parents who might have children with exceptional needs, who can discuss with us their journeys, as well as their wins and their struggles as parents with exceptional needs. We just want to gain knowledge from each other. And again, we are not medical specialists. We are not specialists of any kind, so we're not out here to give medical advice. We're just here to gain a sense of community and to be able to talk and get our stories out. So I'm going to see if Ruth is actually in the audience. And she is, and I'm going to bring her up now. While we're waiting for Ruth, I just want to thank everybody. Ah, there she is. Hi, Ruth.
Hello, Kristy.
How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I was just wondering, I'm kind of talking a little bit about what my experience was when I first found out that I had children with exceptional needs. And I was wondering if you could kind of walk us through what happened with you.
Okay, so mine is a little bit of a different story because my children are all adopted, and I knew some of the special needs before we adopted them. So, our oldest child is a girl. She's 25 now. She came to live with us when she was 8 months old, and her diagnosis is fetal alcohol effect. So she struggles.
Okay.
She struggles with some of the short-term memory functions, but she does very well. She's married. She has 2 kids, and she's a great mom.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. And then our next 2 are twins, and they are 21 now. They came to live with us when they were 18 months old. And when they were 18 months, well, actually, I'll go back a little bit. So when we heard about them, we were told that they had been born at 27 weeks gestation, that they were very high needs, that the doctors didn't even know if they would survive the first few months they were alive, and that we needed to be prepared because the first pediatrician said that they would never walk, talk, or feed themselves. However,
Oh, wow.
that is not what God had in mind for them. They do all of that and way more. They read, they enjoy playing computer games, they can write their own names, they love to talk to other people, but they do need a lot of support. So their diagnosis, actually, we didn't find out their specific diagnosis until they were a few years older. They have a genetic anomaly which doesn't have a name. It's a duplication of the 15th chromosome. And when they were diagnosed, there were only 10 case studies in all of North America that had been diagnosed. So we didn't have a lot of information to go on. When the twins came to us at 18 months, they had never been outside sitting on the grass. They had just come off oxygen. They didn't know how to feed themselves. They had just started crawling. So they were more like 8 or 9 month olds developmentally. And we didn't know what to expect, but we decided that we would expect everything that we expected from any other child and see what happened. And so, like I said, they are now 21, almost 22, and doing quite well, although they need a lot of supports. They can't be in the kitchen by themselves. They do dress themselves and bathe themselves and don't have any toileting issues, which is an issue for a lot of kids with their genetic diagnosis. And they do have some autistic tendencies, so I understand some of what you're talking about. Luke loves animals and is fixated on wild animals in particular. He loves wolves and coyotes and dogs too. And Levi is more of a vehicle person, so he can tell you anything about any vehicle coming down the road. He reads the consumer reports and will tell you if a car is recommended or not. But when most people see him on the street, they think that he doesn't know a whole lot. So those are my twins. And then
Now,
we adopted their brother, who is 20 now. And he has more what I would call a hidden disability. He has the same genetic anomaly, but he's way higher functioning. So he's actually living independently now, but still has struggles and needs a lot of support. And then our youngest daughter is 14, and she has hearing loss and is very nearsighted, which is the same as Levi. But otherwise, she's functions very well. She goes to school and is in regular classes and achieving 70s as an average in school. So those are my kiddos.
that is wonderful. Now, when you found out that they had all these different needs, how did that make you feel?
Well, like you said, every day is different. And some days I was overwhelmed. And I was especially overwhelmed when I remember taking Luke and Levi to the speech therapist, because that's where we were told to take them to get some help with some of their feeding issues. Levi, in particular, would hardly eat anything when he came to us. He would eat baby food, but he'd spit out the little chunks of potatoes. And yeah, it's really hard to feed him anything other than baby food. And at 18 months, we wanted to help him learn to eat other things. And so we took him to a speech pathologist, and they're like, well, yeah, we help people with feeding issues, but we've never seen anything like this before, and we really don't know what to tell you.
Wow.
So a lot of it was trial and error. And what we ended up finding worked for Levi. I mean, we finally figured out that he was he has a lot of sensory issues, including in his mouth. And so he needed something to calm his mouth down so that he could experience the taste and flavors of and fiber or whatever of the other foods. And so what we did for a while was we put yogurt on a lot of the food that he couldn't handle otherwise, because that calmed his mouth enough that he could eat other food. And then once he got used to feeling other food in his mouth, then we gradually took the yogurt away and just kept introducing new foods to him. So that's what we figured out. So yeah, it was overwhelming on some days. Other days, I say that my boys turned me into a mama bear advocate, because I,
Yes, yes. I feel you on that.
yeah, don't you dare pick on my boys. And like you were saying about the teachers, some people, we have met some amazing people in our journey, people who love our boys just as much as we do and do everything that they can to meet their needs. And then we have met other people who say things like, your boys shouldn't be in the same classroom as my kids because they're slowing the learning down.
Yes.
Um, and
Have you ever been told that your boys should not have an education or could not graduate? I went through that with my daughter. I was told that because my daughter is autistic and she has mild retardation, that she can never graduate high school. And I'm just going to be blunt, that pissed me off. I mean, I was like, who are you to tell me that my child cannot learn? And so I worked for years with her on different things to make sure that she did get an education. Have you had anyone tell you that?
well, in Alberta, thankfully, they have a different philosophy. Their philosophy here, and I know it's a little different than the States, because in Canada, we have provincial school regulations. And even though there's school boards in specific areas, the regulations for the province control everything that the school boards do. So in Alberta, um, every child has a right to education. Now, what that education looks like will vary. And some school divisions are a lot more accommodating than other school divisions. Our boys were always in the regular classroom, but they were pulled out a lot for one-on-one. And they did get what they call in Alberta a certificate of completion, which means basically that they were in the building for 12 years. It doesn't give them any ability to get a job or do anything like that, which is a little frustrating. But at least they were in the classroom with other kids. They learned how to make friendships and carry on conversations, and they did. I remember one day when they were in grade 6, Levi came home and we had a notebook that went back and forth between us and the teacher. And the teacher told us that Levi had a display because they were doing the stars and galaxies and planets. And Levi had figured out that there was a planet missing from her display. None of the other kids figured that out. So
That's awesome.
yeah,
that is so awesome.
It's interesting to see what they pick up. And like I said, some people look at him and think that he doesn't know a lot, but he's very smart in many ways.
Now, would you say that's true for most special needs? I personally feel it's true that even though they have a diagnosis of some sort of exceptional need, these children are very, very smart, and people take them to be as not smart, and they look at them and say, oh my gosh, you're autistic, or oh my gosh, you have fetal alcohol syndrome. You're not going to know what we're doing. Have you had any similar uh, instances like that?
Well, yes, I have had people say things like that. And another funny story about Levi, this was a few years ago. He was sitting in a conversation and he was with some friends, and they were talking about vehicles, and there happened to be a Ford salesman there. And the Ford salesman mentioned a specific vehicle, and Levi said, Ford stopped making that vehicle. And the salesman said, no, they didn't. And Levi said, oh, yes, they did. They stopped in such and such a year. And I wasn't there, so I don't know if the salesman argued back and forth or not, but apparently he did go home and check, and Levi was correct.
That is so awesome. Now, another question for you, because I know we're going to be running out of time shortly. Another question I have for you, Ruth, is what do you have to say to parents that have children with exceptional needs? What is your main advice, not medical advice, just advice as a parent? What would you give to someone who just received a diagnosis of special needs for their child?
I would say take the diagnosis with a grain of salt. Like I mentioned, the first pediatrician who saw Luke and Levi said that they would never walk, talk, or feed themselves. And I think sometimes doctors give that diagnosis to prepare parents for the worst case scenario. But just because they say it doesn't mean that has to be what happens.
Now, would you agree? Because here's my advice, and I'm going to see if you agree with it. You are your child's voice when they have special needs. You, as a parent, are going to be their voice for most of their lives, if not all of their lives.
Definitely.
Do what you know is right for your child. I, as a mother, had fought for my daughter's right for an education. And I also have experienced with my son bullying. So I'm an advocate for anti bullying. I am the voice for my children, and that is the advice I have for other parents. Do you agree?
Yes, very strongly. I had people come to me and say, how come your boys have so many supports and other kids who have special needs don't have those supports in place? And I just looked at them and I said, because I advocate for my boys. And
I applaud you. I do. I applaud you because no one understands what we need to do as parents. You definitely have to be an advocate. You have to fight for your children's rights. I applaud you deeply and I tip my hat to you on that.
thank you. And actually, I decided to join the local school board because I saw that other kids were not getting what they needed. And so I became a school board trustee and then had the opportunity to advocate for a lot of other kids, which brings joy to my heart.
That is so wonderful. I am going to conclude this pretty shortly, but I wanted to touch up on the fact that we are going to be doing this, you and I, on Monday nights at the same time. I believe it's 5:30 Central and 6:30 Eastern. And next week it's going to be you hosting on your page, correct?
Yes, I will be the host, and we will see if there's other people that want to answer questions. Maybe before we wrap up, do you have time to see if other people want to join the conversation? Because I can step down.
We sh- we sure do. I have a few minutes. I'm sorry if this seems rushed, but I do have an issue going on at home. I do have a few minutes that I can spare though. So I'm going to let Ruth step down. Ruth, thank you so much for joining with me tonight. And I'm going to let Ruth step down and see if anybody else wants to join.
Okay, I got to figure out how to step down here.
I'm trying to figure that out too, since we're both kind of new. Oh, I think I
Um,
figured it out. All right, if anybody else would like to come on up and talk a little bit, I'm open for about another 5 minutes here. In the meantime, I just wanted to tell everyone again, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you so much for listening. I am still a little new to coming on social audio. Social audio is a newer thing for me, so I might get a little tongue tied here and there. And unfortunately, sometimes I have to go a little quicker than planned due to issues going on at home. As you all just found out, I do have two children with special needs here at home. And that can be quite the challenge because they're both on different ends of the spectrum. My son is more high functioning. He could do a little more for himself, but my daughter has more difficulty with life skills such as cooking, cleaning, showering. And unfortunately, they are both on a schedule. And if that schedule doesn't get met, my daughter goes into a meltdown. And sometimes those meltdowns turn into things being thrown at my head. We are still working with a specialist on how to kind of knock those uh, schedules down a little bit and learning to let them transition a little easier out of it. But that's why sometimes I am rushed here on Wisdom. I enjoyed having Ruth with me. I'm actually, since no one's coming up, I'm going to go ahead and bring her back for 1 minute and let her talk to you a little bit about next Monday. Ruth, I'm going to bring you back on if you're still with me. And here she comes. She will be here. 3, 2, 1, and Ruth is back. Hi, Ruth.
Here I am. I
All right.
Yeah, so next
So,
week I thought maybe we would tackle the whole topic of advocacy because that's definitely something that parents, exceptional parents, need to learn, and we can talk about ways to learn those skills. We can share tips with each other. We can share bad experiences, good experiences, whatever you want to share with us. So I will be hosting, and Kristy will be joining me to comment as well. And we look forward to having some of the rest of you join the discussion. If you have something to add, we love to hear that as well.
definitely. Now, I will be next Monday on the road, but I am going to be bringing my headset so I can join you for a little while. I have some business that I have to take care of in another state. But Ruth, again, thank you for joining me. And I wanted to let everybody know this is actually Ruth's idea to start this. I've been wanting to start this for some time, but didn't quite know how. But Ruth got us going. And you know what, Ruth, I thank you so much. It's been wonderful to talk to you. And I see a lot of our wonderful friends out in the audience. I want to thank them for joining us tonight, too. I see Billy and a lot of our other friends. So thank you, everyone. And I'm sorry that I have to rush off, but I look forward to next Monday, Ruth. And everybody, if you haven't added Ruth L. Snyder to your list, please follow her now so that you can continue on, because Ruth and I are going to alternate every Monday. So this Monday was with me. Next Monday will be on Ruth's page, and then the following Monday we'll go back to my page. All right. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
And you all have a good night, everybody.
Take care.